I say life's an inside job because we create things inside before we bring them out to the world. I mean, I did it with my business. I'm sure you've done it with all your companies. Is it starts internally. Sometimes it can be fueled by the outside, but if you don't believe or have trust in your vision, nobody else will. And I think every entrepreneur, every business owner, everybody that's achieving anything great, that's where it all starts, whether we know it's happening or not.
Welcome to the Be It Till You See It podcast, where we talk about taking messy action, knowing that perfect is boring. I'm Lesley Logan, Pilates instructor and fitness business coach. I've trained thousands of people around the world, and the number one thing I see stopping people from achieving anything is self-doubt. My friends, action brings clarity, and it's the antidote to fear. Each week, my guests will bring bold, executable, intrinsic, and targeted steps that you can use to put yourself first and be it till you see it. It's a practice, not a perfect. Let's get started. Hi, Be It Babe. Okay, I'm so excited for this. I was on the road and I got to do this interview you're about to hear in person. And in-person interviews are just interestingly, they're not better or worse, but they're different, and it's really nice. And I found myself really intrigued by this whole entire interview because we all know that life is not linear, and it can be interesting when you meet someone. I have Greg Tomchik on, and he was an MLB professional baseball player, and now he's in cybersecurity. And I'm like, I gotta, how did the dots? How did we get here? And something I think is really cool to hear is how much he asked questions during his time as a baseball player that allowed him to really lead him to what he's doing today. And so I'm really excited for you to hear from him and his story. And don't let cybersecurity make you go, what? It's not be it till you see it in cybersecurity. There's so much here for you to learn. And he's such a cool person. And he also has an amazing podcast, which he interviewed me on, Connected Mindset. So if you are enjoying him on mine, I hope you go listen to the conversation we have over there, because he asked me some incredible questions that no one has ever asked me before. So here is Greg Tomchik.
All right, babe, I'm so excited. I have a really cool dude here for you guys. I got to meet him via Zoom and an amazing group of people, and I've found him very fascinating. I'm just going to say, I feel like I'm learning a lot about you that I didn't know. But Greg Tomchik, you're here today with us. Can you tell everyone who you are and what you rock at?
Yeah, such a pleasure to be here with you, Lesley. I rock at helping people build trust. Through the years of my career, I've been able to help executives and companies build trust with the outside of their company, but oftentimes they have a hard time building trust with themselves. And that's really what I've come to specialize in, is helping them build trust from the inside out, whether they're running a company, running a sports team, or running their own personal lives.
Okay, that's a very big thing to help people do. I feel like a lot of our listeners they actually do struggle trusting others. And they're not even necessarily big companies. Like, you've worked with some incredible companies. Can we go back a little bit? Like, did you start out wanting to work in companies and helping them build trust? When they ask, what did you want to be when you grew up? I don't know that was probably what you said. So Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I feel like I've lived multiple lifetimes. So I went from a kid who was military family, and military is a lot of, trust in the community, people looking to you as the warrior who's defending their community or country. Ended up being a professional baseball player, and I wasn't able to excel in baseball until I was able to trust myself, which allowed other people to trust and put me into those difficult situations. So when I got out of baseball, I was trying to find my identity, and I looked back to my baseball career and said, what made me unique in that specific environment? And it was a lot of intentional trust building. I would ask executives of the teams the right questions. I would try to go out of my way to build that connection with them in ways that other players didn't. Most of the time, players would, just like in a lot of companies, we exclude ourselves from the executives and just kind of, they're overseeing us. I always tried to engage, show my compassion for what they were doing for the overall team, and be consistent with that. And that's what helped me build trust with them. And then eventually they gave me the opportunity to play professionally and be able to put on top stages to perform. And if I didn't have that trust with them, they never would have given me that opportunity. So when I was running my second company, which was a software development company, we had something called a cyber attack. And at that time, I didn't know what a cyber attack or cybersecurity really was. And I wanted to help other people who may go through that in the future kind of solve that or prevent that from taking place in their lives. And what I realized when I would go in as a cybersecurity expert to brief these, boards of people doing business for 50 years at the end of their career, now running these Fortune companies, was they brought us in to build trust with their vendors, with their customers, with regulators. And I started to ask some questions that was important to me as an athlete was, what do you do in your daily life? What does your family look like? How do you want to intentionally map what I call the rhythm of existence to make sure that this company's successful from the inside out? And what I realized is a lot of these executives were such a cluster in their personal lives that it brought it into their business. And a lot of that came from a void. And I considered that the void of them being able to trust themselves enough to be stern on the standards and values that they knew they needed to have, but didn't know how to carry that out. So I started to help a lot of these executives on a personal level develop the trust internally, which a lot of times a therapist or some type of talk therapy would get them there. But I matched it with the goal that they wanted as a rhythm for their business life and tried to find a way to integrate those two. And what I heard from executives was, wow, I now trust myself to be able to carry out and do what I need to do. And my company has really revamped and reshaped our ability to, be successful, be fulfilled, and also be secure at the same time.
Okay. This is so fascinating because I'm sure anyone heard cyber attack, cybersecurity, they're like, okay, hold on. That's not, that's not anything that I think we're all very clear. We don't want anyone have access to any of our information online. And that's constantly something companies are thinking about. I don't think that anyone probably thinks of it and also thinks who's making sure the people at the companies are taking care of themselves in a way that makes sure that down the line, we're all being protected. So how did you put those things together?
Yeah. So,
or is that the secret sauce?
No. It's something we share for free. It's out there on our blog and different things that we post. But a lot of it was your security risk from either a digital or a physical standpoint is based off of the vulnerabilities that you have. So a vulnerability we consider as a gap. If you have all of these gaps, but you think you're secure, you're insecure by default. And those are the people that typically have these cyber attacks. And that's what I had in my company is I was so focused on technology development that I had all of these gaps in my understanding of what it meant to be holistically secured. And so when I would go into these companies, I would just go in to ask them the right questions to find those vulnerabilities. And I found this void of trust was their biggest vulnerability because they didn't trust anybody, which gave them a lot of blind spots. You can't walk around and just not trust anybody when you're running a multi-million-dollar, even bigger company. It drives you crazy. It makes you miss a lot of things because you're so focused on so many different things.
Yeah.
And it created a lot of clarity for executives. And I really saw a lot of them let their guard down because they were now able to trust themselves enough to, go tell a team or tell one person, hey, I'd love for you to fulfill this for the company, and just trust that they're going to do it in the best way for that individual. And it's the same end result, but they were trying to micromanage so much. And you can only micromanage so many things. And it just created a lot of catastrophe, a lot of lost money, a lot of lost people. And really it threatened the whole culture. And as we know, the culture of a company, a culture of a community, a culture of a family is really where everything either lives or dies.
Yeah, I know. And I've never thrived well in an environment where a boss micromanaged me. I can think back to the last actual job I had where I was an employee. And where I succeeded the most is when I was given kind of free reign. They're like, here's what we're expecting of you. Here's what your goals are. Here's what to do. And I could do it in my way. There was a lot of trust from from the people who were above me. And then there was a shift and there was changes. And then the president changed in the company. And then all these you got to fill out this document. You got to do this. You have to check this box every day. And I was like, you get to the point where you don't feel like there's any trust in you. And that makes you as the employee not feel good or like you can thrive or you have ideas. And I think in our own lives, I think a lot of listeners can even look back into like the times they've micromanaged people in their lives, their family, their partners, their spouses, and it doesn't build trust. In fact, it does the opposite, and it doesn't make you trust them anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's something I continue to learn about, but when I initially had somebody give it back to me of this process you took us through helped us build trust from the inside out, I really attached to that idea and concept and wanted to bring that out to the world, and have been able to speak on international stages about it. And the end result, what I've found after like a small business meeting or at a conference, is everybody approaches people differently after they hear the topic and they hear and can connect to it and hear the internal voice and what the internal voice is saying. One of the things I'm big on is there's like this self-help, personal development craze that's been going on for years. And I'm big on the self-discovery. So when I'm saying something to somebody, I want them to hear the internal voice of how that's resonating with them, to speak the voice into themselves. And they have to hear that, as opposed to me giving them, a step-by-step process to say, this is what you need to do to achieve your goal. And some people need that. But the best things happen when you have that self-discovery. And I've been able to find ways to get executives and get people in an audience to start to hear that voice and start to kind of trust the voice that they're hearing. And then they go out and connect with people in amazing ways.
Yeah, I think I love that you're like, because there is a lot of self-help, but self-discovery is, it can happen through self-help, but mostly it is within. Yeah. And we often look outward for other people to help us. And that's when we can be more vulnerable if we're not sure of who we are. Let's go on to trust. Let's talk about that a little bit. How is trust built?
Yeah.
And I have some listeners, I feel like I have a hard time trusting people. And I feel for that. I have to inherently trust a lot of people. I have to trust when I'm crossing the street that someone's going to stop because they're supposed to. Like, I feel for people who have distrust or mistrust or no trust in people. Like, how do we work on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the journey to get there is a little bit different for everybody. I think at the core of trust with anybody is consistency. So you want to have that consistent engagement with someone that you're building trust with. We want to have compassion. So you want to have an approach to understand where they're coming from. And I think a lot of that comes down to your personal morals and values and standards. A lot of people say standards. But knowing what you want in the world is important to have the compassion for somebody else. And that, compassion to me is, asking questions that allow people to share what they believe about the world, what they want to see carried out, whether that's business or personal life. So you have the consistency that people need. If you see people that are inconsistent, you're not going to trust them.
Right.
And if you have the compassion and you feel that they have the compassion, that builds a mutual trust with each other that you're speaking your truth, our truths align, and that that's a multiplier for that trust building process. One of the big things I talk about is connection. Connections, it's considered in a number of ways, technology connection, people connecting and having conversation. But I think connecting with people how you enjoy connecting. Some people like to have deep conversations. Some people like to say surface level. So when you're going out to build trust with people that you want to be around, to be able to have the clarity of how you like to connect to people. For me, I like to ask deep questions. So when I'm going out in public and, I'm not asking, what do you do for a living? I'm like, what makes you feel alive? Like these questions that for some people are big, but I know when I am connecting with someone that really enjoys those questions, that we're building trust from the start to be able to have future conversations like that. So I think, it all goes back to those 3 C's for me. But I really think it takes all 3 to really build trust from an external standpoint, but also I say from the inside out. So you have to be consistent with yourself. You have to connect with yourself in ways like Pilates. For me, I do a lot of yoga. I exercise. If I skip out on something that I told myself I was going to do, then it starts to build a distrust in myself. So it's that consistency, connecting to myself in the ways that I enjoy, and being compassionate with myself, like asking my internal voice, what's important for me today, this week, what do I want to accomplish? And sticking to that. And if I'm able to do that on a daily, weekly, quarterly, annual basis, then I trust that I'm going to carry out what I say I'm going to do. And if I can't trust myself, I can't build trust with other people. So I say from the inside out, because it takes me doing those 3 things each day to be able to go out in my business and personal life and build trust with other people. And if I'm doing that from an authentic place, people are going to sense that. And I think that's what a lot of us are doing. And what I found myself before I did this hard work, I was trying so hard to build trust with other people and was distracting the trust that I didn't have in myself.
Yeah.
And that's something I found through baseball, because if I didn't build that trust, I wouldn't have been able to get to that professional level on the field.
I was going to ask a question about like rebuilding trust after if we've lost trust somewhere. And I do want to touch on that, but I want to highlight, it sounds very clear to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, you have to have trust within yourself. For my overachievers and my perfectionists listening, it's not about doing the 3 journal pages plus the run plus this and putting yourself in a position where you cannot achieve consistency in your daily life with the commitments you want to have with yourself, but picking things you can be consistent with so you can build trust within yourself. So then it's going to be easier to trust others, but also for them to trust you, because people can sense a dissonance that's there. You know, we can fake it till we make it all the time, which is not what this podcast is about. But to be it till you see it is actually to like stand in the power. What does a person who trusts himself act like? What does a person who trusts himself and trust others do? How do they engage in conversation? It's going to require that inside work.
Yeah, it's inside out. I say life's an inside job, because we create things inside before we bring them out to the world. I mean, I did it with my business. I'm sure you've done it with all your companies. It starts internally. Sometimes it can be fueled by the outside, but if you don't believe or have trust in your vision, nobody else will.
Yeah.
And I think every entrepreneur, every business owner, everybody that's achieving anything great, that's where it all starts, whether we know it's happening or not.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. Okay. I want to talk about baseball, because my family, if they're listening, would be really upset if we didn't. My grandfather was a professional baseball player as well. He quit it to go be in World War II. So it was like your country and baseball, right?
Yeah.
It takes a lot to become a professional athlete. Like there's just so few percentage of people. And then also what I know about baseball is so few of them get into playing for the majors. A lot of people end up being around the minors. I want to hear about that. And also like the switching out of it. I imagine it's a big transition from who you were and what you say you do, know? So we can talk a little about your story there.
Yeah, I like to say when I was getting out of baseball, I was going through 3 divorces at one time, and I'll kind of I'll get to that story. But it was a very tough transition. So I had an older brother that also played professional baseball, so it was kind of someone to look up to. I always say you need someone to look up to and someone to chase, which chasing myself in 10 years or it's something I'll never kind of get to, but I always had my older brother to pave a path and make the mistakes before I got there. That's like the middle child syndrome.
Yeah.
And he was able to get into professional baseball 3 years before me. So I was able to see what enabled him to do that. He was a free agent, so he didn't get drafted. But I realized what these scouts were looking for to get in. And from middle school to high school to college, he helped kind of pave that path and make some of the mistakes so that I could come in and make a more clear path. But it was really about clarity on what I was good at. So I was a pitcher. So I was on the mound, throwing different pitches and trying to make sure that people didn't hit it too hard or hit it out of the ballpark. And I knew what I was really good at. I threw the ball really hard. I sometimes didn't know where it was going. And what I would go to scouts and ask is, what do I need to do this year to improve on your, scoreboard? Or, what are you measuring me on? And a lot of them said composure and leadership. So it wasn't even a skill set thing. And we always focus on skill sets as opposed to some of the intangibles, especially in athletics, because it's like you need to throw hard, you need to be really fast, you need to hit the ball really hard. And when I actually got through the minor leagues, I would go to leadership and as I was building trust with them, would ask, hey, where do you see me as a player? What do you like about what I bring to the team? And they always said your composure and your leadership. And I was like, well, what about my skills? Like I'm throwing the ball 95 miles an hour, had a lot of movement on it. Like it was, I was in the upper tier of the pitchers that I was competing with. Some of them were younger than me, but they always said you give the team an energy and an example to follow of what it looks like to be a good player from the outside. And they were like, appearance is very important to us. The fans really attached to leaders and want to, bring them into the community. So I really started to double down in those areas. I started to, talk to the team, give speeches to the team, talk about the different trials and tribulations that we've gone through in the season, how we persevered. And I obviously was still improving my skill set. But when you hear from the outside world, like, this is the role we need you to play. We need you to be the leader. We need you to be composed and show the other players that are younger than you what they should look like, even though their skill set is either just the same or a little bit better than yours. So I really doubled down in that area, which was important for my career to continue to move up. But eventually, the skills need to be there. It's like everybody's at the same level. And some of those intangibles bring you to the next level. And I reached a level where, they were basically like, hey, you're kind of aging out, which I was only, 24, 25 at that time. But you're competing against 17 and 18-year-olds. So.
Yeah. That's the, I mean, every time I watch any sports, I'm like, oh, they're getting old for the gymnastics. Like you think about those things. And so I was a runner. And people like, oh, would you let your kids play sports if you're going to have them? And I said, they'd be runners. You have a much longer career, less money, longer career.
Yeah, definitely.
So that sucks because it's not like an injury took you out. It's not like we're playing worse. It's just kind of like you hit this wall that they no longer could work with. So you had to make a different decision. You had to change careers. What's that like to wake up and not train to pitch the next day?
Yeah.
Because you still go work out, but like you're not actually training for that skill set anymore.
Yeah, it's a huge shock. I mean, that was my whole identity because the community, the team, my parents, at some point in time looked at me as Greg, the baseball player. I had different things going on outside, which I considered like my plan B because I knew it wasn't going to last forever. But the outside world and how they view you and how they talk to you is important for that internal voice. And if they weren't giving me that and saying, when's your next game? We love seeing you pitch last night. That was the way that my cup was filled up. So when I wasn't getting that, I had that drought period of, who is Greg? What's his identity? He was considered the dumb jock in high school. So it's like, I'm not smart enough to get a job, to run a company, to do anything important in the world if baseball is not there. And, there was a lot of what I considered vulnerabilities at the time that I was trying to push away and try to find high-paying jobs and just do these activities that were just spinning the wheel.
Yeah.
And until I got clear on what Greg could be based off of those things that people used to tell me, the composure, the leadership, how I could cultivate those in a way to bring those to the world of business, of technology, of personal discovery, that is really where that identity started to shift away from, I was the baseball player, I lived that life, but I'm no longer that. And I had to come to grips with that, which was, a 5 to 7 year process to get there. So
yeah, I was going to say, like, how long does it take? Is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? 5 to 7 years. That's a long time. It's not a long time, but it's like, thank you for sharing that because I think sometimes we go, especially on Thursday when people hear the recap and Brad reads your amazing bio, it's going to be like, you were a baseballer and now you're doing this. And it's like, it is a journey. Yeah. And it's okay for it to be.
Yeah, you have to, they used to always say in baseball, embrace the process, but we all want things immediate. But what I always went back to is I didn't get to that point based off of like one performance. It took them seeing me 6 or 7 times and they were like, wow, this guy's composed. He's a leader amongst his team, leads by example. And, by chance, he throws the ball pretty hard and can get people out.
Yeah.
But that was the secondary. And I see that a lot in business as we focus so much on skill sets and certifications. But you can be the most skilled individual. If you don't trust yourself, if you don't treat people the right way, those skills are not as valuable.
Yeah. It's, thanks for bringing that back up because I always tell a lot of people who are listening, we coach them on their business. And I'm like, you can hire, like, skill is easy to teach, to be honest. Like, some skills are going to be harder than others and some take longer to develop. But like, if the personality of the person isn't something you want to work with, doesn't align with your values, doesn't see the vision that you have, it really doesn't matter how good they are at it. I work with a lot of studios who are like, but they're my best teacher. And I'm like, they're stealing from you. They're not following the policies. They're not doing these things. Like, I don't care how good they are, And I recently hired an amazing woman and she's never been an executive assistant before, but I looked at her resume and I was like, look, I've done all these jobs. Like, if you've worked in retail and you've been an assistant manager and a manager, you can handle a budget and a schedule and customer service. Like you're going to figure out the skills you need to be my assistant. But the fact that you can hold on to multiple ideas at one time is what I need. Like I need that. And I said, so I'm hiring you because I like who you are and I trust you. And I think that you're the person I want to talk to in my business every single day. So you'll go learn these things. And this is what I'm hiring for. And I think that is something people misunderstand, and they get so focused on learning the skill and they don't know why they're not being chosen over someone else. And it's a lot of it is trust, but a lot of it's that those qualities that are unique that someone's looking for.
Yeah, people don't put them on their resume. It's amazing how you have to get to know people and in order to tease those out. And I think companies don't do that typically. They hire people on a resume and hope that they have these character traits that are needed to excel. And I think that's why there's so much turnover in today's world, because people are doing things they're trying to do things too quick.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I also think, like, I want to highlight something else you did that I don't want anyone to miss. You asked people, what can I be doing better? What do you like about me? What are these things? I think a lot of us are waiting for that review every year to be told these things. And it's like, it's the same thing in your business. I have to ask our customers, why do you like us? What are we doing the best? What aren't we doing really well? What can we improve on? And, it's asking the right people as well. Cause some people, they'll say what I'm like, well, I'm not trying to do that well. So that's okay. But if we don't know what those things are, one, we can't put them on a resume, can't put them as a marketing tool, can't put them as a thing that can actually build the more trust and better relationships than, some of the vanity metrics that people put out there. We have the most classes, that we have these things, and that's great. But a lot of people are picking stuff based off how it makes them feel.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're like on from one feeling to the next. I call them feeling islands. Like you're going lily pad to lily pad of different feelings, and that creates inconsistency with ourselves as well as with others. So I think what you're doing by asking those questions, it's showing compassion. You do it consistently. And then, also you're finding ways to connect with people. People like to be asked how they feel about something. Yeah. And if you can ask them, hey, how are you feeling about the service or the product we're delivering? Oftentimes people are more than willing to share. Once they feel, you want to connect with them, you're compassionate by asking them a specific question, and you're consistent with it. Those are all those trust building pillars that we, help companies do from a security perspective, but it spans across the whole culture and the whole company.
Yeah, that's so cool. Okay, so today you're in cybersecurity. What is it? What does that mean?
Yeah, and it's a good question. So, cyber is basically connected security. So, that trust pillar is a part of a connected company. I think of connection as our ability to connect with the environment around us, and that's a lot of what my show, The Connected Mindset Live, is all about. That includes technology. A lot of people think cybersecurity, they think technology. And most of cybersecurity is about the technologies we use, our phones, the applications, the computers. But a big part of cybersecurity that was not taken into account before we got into this industry and wanted to do something a little bit different was the people aspect and the processes that we all go through. I call it, and I mentioned this earlier, kind of the rhythm of existence, but how the people in a company wake up. Like, what does their personal lives look like? And not getting too deep into exactly what they're doing, but how does that carry over into what they do for the company? A lot of times, if our life's hectic, we bring hecticness to the company. It'll make someone a little bit angry, and then it's a trickle effect. So how do you intentionally support your people to make sure the company has the right awareness and training of these different connected ways of securing the company? And it's not just technology, it's also making sure you have what I call kind of cross-culture trust. And digital trust is a piece of that, but it's not the whole puzzle when it comes to cybersecurity. And that's what I saw by working with these large companies. They wanted something more people-focused and less technology-focused. I like to say we're so connected today through technology that we're less connected than ever before, because a text message, a DM, going through social media, that is it's kind of a quick dopamine hit.
Yeah.
But there's nothing like going up to somebody in an office and like having that connection conversation and doing it consistently, asking them questions about, hey, how was your morning? You know, how are your kids doing? Yeah. All of that stuff is what builds trust. And today we think that we can do that through the phone, and sometimes we can, sometimes it does work, but there's a very big shift going on in the cybersecurity field specifically, where people are starting to think about security less from the technology side and all the cool, you know, password managers, configurations, all these different rules you can put on it, and thinking more about the person. And if that person has a bunch of vulnerabilities, somebody can walk right in the front door and take advantage of either a company or a person.
Oh, 100%. You can hire the wrong contractor. Yeah. You know, my inbox is full of people trying to sell me on whatever they can do with my Facebook ads or my Amazon this. And I'm like, I'm the worst. I usually just hit block spam, or sometimes I'm like, you don't even know what I do. It's clear from these ads. So you can just stop right now. But like, if you are in a vulnerable state, you are feeling like you don't have enough things, you could hire the wrong person that could really come in, and you paid them to do it. Yeah. That is so, it's such an interesting way. Definitely not what I thought cybersecurity was. So I think this is the most interesting cybersecurity conversation we'll ever have. What are you most excited about right now?
Yeah, I think getting on more stages. Like, I love going to talk to people. It's something that fills my cup up, and it goes back to that leadership and that composure that is at the core of everything I do, whether it was athletics, you know, leading my family, or going out in the community and talking about things that I'm passionate about. I think just seeing each person that I interact with build better trust with themselves, because I went through that hard process of fighting that internal battle myself. So every person that gives me that point of feedback, and it's not why I do it for the feedback, but saying, I now feel more clear and more consistent in my personal and business life. That is what I'm extremely excited about, just creating that multiple times over again as I interact with different types of people. And go to more events where people walk away from the talk that I'm giving and they better connect with the world around them, with the people around them, by doing simple things that are intentional, you know, connecting with people, you know, asking compassionate questions, and then being able to be consistent about, you know, how you're carrying yourself into the world. And I think that builds better trust, which builds better communities, builds better companies. And I think, you know, in my mind, it builds a better world around us that's a little bit more certain, because as business owners, there's a lot of uncertainty. And if we have people around us that we trust, it's going to be a better business, a better world for us all to live in.
Yeah, I agree. I think like one of the things that's most certain is how uncertain it's all going to be. But you're right. If you're surrounded, I know for myself, like I just spent a couple of days with one of my best friends in person. We live, you know, 3,500 miles away from each other. We don't even always have time to get on the phone and things like that. But when you're one-on-one, you do feel more connected. Yeah. And then you do interact with other people, strangers, differently, because you don't feel like you're alone and you're in your own head with your own story of that's not always great. So I also feel like I'm definitely I'm pretty solid on my morning routines, but sometimes let things slide, and I can say like, oh, shouldn't do that because it's not going to help me stay trusting of myself. So thank you for that. Yeah. All right, we're going to take a brief break. We're going to find out people can find you, follow you, work with you. All right, where can people find you, follow you, work with you?
Yeah, very active on LinkedIn, Greg Tomchik. Instagram is one of our top platforms for video and things of that nature that we're putting out. Website is valor-cybersecurity.com. I have my own personal website, gregtomchick.com. Love to hear from people, you know, on the journey they're going through, maybe something that they're battling with. Love to answer questions and engage with the community. A lot of the things we put out on Instagram videos is answering questions that we get commonly. So, you know, one of my core pillars is connection, as I've mentioned multiple times. So definitely reach out, connect, and ask me any questions you may have.
Yeah, it's one of our core pillars at our company too. So that's probably why we have ended up in several groups together. All right, you've given us a lot, but just in case people need more or summed up or an action step that they can take after hearing this, what do you have for us? Bold, executable, intrinsic, or targeted steps people can take to be it till they see it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for me, the hardest thing that I did that was bold was to set my own standards. And I basically, you know, took a piece of paper, wrote 1 to 5 and said, you know, what is the standard that I need to have to attract the right person? And, you know, that was transparency. It was that compassion. So people that were inquisitive about, what I was going through. And I basically just listed out all my standards. And every time I meet somebody, I just go through those 5 of like, hey, here's who Greg is. Is that someone you're interested in getting to know? So that was bold for me because I was a, kind of a shy young kid. My parents were both military, so they never talked about emotions. So the fact that I'm able to help other people do this, but I do it myself, really just have 5 things that are really important to me from a standard standpoint of what I know will build a good relationship with somebody like Greg. I just basically state those out there. And I think when you're clear on that, you start to either weed people out that aren't good for you, or you attract the right people who are going to help improve you. I always say, I'm going out into the world with a ship that I've built. I want people to enhance that ship, not tear down half of it and have to rebuild it later. So it's a good way to both connect with yourself to understand what you think is important, and that builds trust internally, and then to bring that to other people and really be bold and state that as a prerequisite to having a relationship with you. It allows you to really, in my opinion, live your best life and have the rhythm you need of fulfillment and some of the other words people say with success and things of that nature. But I'm really focused these days on, building more joy, building what I think of as more fulfillment, and having those bold actions of just knowing my standards and really speaking them extremely clearly. I've been able to attract the people that, I want around me, and it's done really wonders for my life as a person.
I love that. We've never had that. That's amazing. That's so great. Great. You're awesome. This is wonderful. Thanks for being on the show. Guys, how are you going to use these tips in your life? We want you to tag the Beit Pod, tag Greg, let us know, and share this with a friend who needs to hear it, especially one who has been maybe not as trusting of others or feeling like they're a little bit lost. Anyone you think can benefit from what Greg has shared with you today. Thank you so much. And until next time, be it till you see it.
That's all I got for this episode of the Be It Till You See It podcast. One thing that would help both myself and future listeners is for you to rate the show and leave a review. And follow or subscribe for free wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, make sure to introduce yourself over at the Be It Pod on Instagram. I would love to know more about you. Share this episode with whoever you think needs to hear it. Help us and others be it till you see it. Have an awesome day.
Be It Till You See It is a production of the Bloom Podcast Network. If you want to leave us a message or a question that we might read on another episode, you can text us at +1 310 905 5534 or send a DM on Instagram at BeItPod.
It's written, filmed, and recorded by your host, Lesley Logan, and me, Brad Crowell.
It is transcribed, produced, and edited by the Epic team at Diseño.co.
Our theme music is by Ali at Apex Production Music, and our branding by designer and artist Gianfranco Cioffi.
Special thanks to Melissa Solomon for creating our visuals.
Also to Angelina Herrico for adding all of our content to our website. And finally, to Meredith Root for keeping us all on point and on time.